But even with the eagles, they were still outnumbered. In that last hour, Beorn himself had appeared. No one knew how or from where. He came alone and in bear's shape, and he seemed to have grown almost to giant size in his wrath. The roar of his voice was like drums and guns, and he tossed wolves and goblins from his path like straws and feathers. Well met, friends. Yoyston here with a video on the Bear Men of Middle-earth, called the Beornings. Now, there isn't too much information on these creatures, but I will compile what I can here, and this video will serve as histories for both Beorn the Patriarch of the Beornings, and his son Grimbeorn as well. Let's delve right into it. Living in the vales of the Anduin River during the 3rd and early 4th ages, Beorn and his kin are descended from Northmen, who were related to the Edain, or the Men of Beleriand in the First Age, and the Beornings perhaps came from the 3rd House of Men, named the House of Hodor. They also share some familial connection with the Eotheid, the Woodmen of Mirkwood, and the Bardings, or the People of Dale. Thus, this makes the Beorning middlemen, and unlike the descendants of Numenor. Beorn and his folk could speak in both common speech and the language of the bears or other creatures, as these men were renowned for their ability to shapeshift into bears. They had fiery tempers and were suspicious of outsiders, but were the utmost kind to all creatures of nature, and they used their strength to protect as many pieces of nature as possible. The Beornings didn't hunt, but rather they made honey cakes that would become world-renowned, and on their land in the Vales they kept horses, ponies, and bees, among other creatures. Thus, the simple folk hated all that disrupted nature, such as goblins, and overall they were not fond of dwarves either. During the events of The Hobbit in 2941 of the Third Age, Beorn is first introduced in the Legendarium as Gandalf had known of him through Radagast the Brown. Beorn is forced to lodge Thorin's company when he is in bear form upon his borders hunting goblins and orcs. In his house, the company is rejuvenated, and they meet many of his creatures after introducing themselves in increments, as to not enrage Beorn. He is convinced of the company's intentions after learning that Gandalf killed the Great Goblin, and after giving them supplies, he would send them to Mirkwood, telling them about the path that leads through the forest. During these events, we don't see other Beornings, and it is possible that Beorn was the last until finding a spouse, but it is unclear. After lending the company ponies to take them to the edge of Mirkwood, Beorn isn't seen again until the Battle of the Five Armies, where he appears from an unknown place, and through shapeshifting into a giant bear creature, turns the tide of battle. He even saves the body of Thorin Oakenshield and slays Bolg, the leader of the Orc army. In these moments, the Hobbit movies are very unlike the book, as Beorn plays an even greater role in the Legendarium. After the battle, Beorn hosts Bilbo, Gandalf, and some other woodmen in his home to celebrate Yule. And after this, we don't see Beorn again, but we hear of his descendants in The Lord of the Rings. It is assumed that Beorn and his folk live relatively average-length lives in accordance with other men, so Beorn passed away before 3018 of the Third Age, as Gloin tells Frodo in the Fellowship of the Ring about Grimbeorn the Old, who was born sometime after the Battle of the Five Armies and succeeded his father as the Patriarch of the Beornings. These beings also helped Aragorn during his quest to deliver Gollum to the Elves of Mirkwood before the main events of The Lord of the Rings. Before the War of the Ring, the Beornings kept the Fort of the Carrock safe from the goblins, and maintained the dwarven trade routes in exchange for high tolls, though it is likely these routes weren't protected during the war. But even through these high tolls for the dwarves, Gimli says the Beornings are the best bakers he knows. It is possible that the Beornings fought Sauron's forces near their homeland during the War of the Ring, as Frodo seized the land of the Beornings aflame while using the ring atop a Munhen. But it seems that some of them survived the war, and helped the Elves of Mirkwood defend their homes because Thranduil and Celeborn give central lands of Erin Lascallan, the newly named Mirkwood, to them. After this, not much is known about the Beornings, as the world entered into the Fourth Age, but it is my guess that they became more and more reclusive from men in their forests and the Misty Mountains. The Beornings further illustrate the raw power of nature in Tolkien's works, in both the simple and ferocious aspects. Though their origin and ends are wholly unknown, It may be that they served Yavanna the Vala and Queen of the Earth. These creatures remind us to respect and guard nature against those who would do it harm. Thank you all for watching, I really appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on the Beornings down below, and please leave this video a like if you enjoyed it. I really had a good time learning about these beings, and I do like that they too are enigmas of nature, like some other characters in the Legendarium. To contact me more directly, join us on Facebook and Twitter through the links in the description below, and subscribe to stay up to date with my next videos about Tolkien's works. As always, thank you all for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my friends.